Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to hear evidence from two of the estate support assistants who worked for the TMO. So who's your first witness, Mr. Kinnear?
The first witness is Paul Steadman, sir.
Good. Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Steadman.
Morning.
I understand you're willing to make the affirmation, so could you read the words on the screen, please?
Yeah. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I should give should be the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Would you like to sit down and make yourself comfortable? Good. When you're ready, Mr. Kinnear.
Thanks, sir. Good morning. Would you first confirm your name for the record?
Yes, it's Paul Steadman.
Thank you. Mr. Steadman, if at any time during your examination you require a break, please say so. That's not a problem. Secondly, please, if any of my questions are unclear, please don't hesitate to say so, and I'll rephrase them so that they are clear. And thirdly and finally, please do keep your voice up. It's so that the shorthand writer can capture everything you say accurately.
Yes.
Now, you have prepared 7 statements in relation to the fire at Grenfell Tower, 5 of which are for the Metropolitan Police and 2 of which were for the inquiry. I'm just going to take you through each of them to confirm the dates and that they are yours. The first statement for the Metropolitan Police was dated the 12th of July 2018 and can be found at Met 000 39814. Is that it?
Yes.
The second statement for the Metropolitan Police is dated the 24th of August 2018, which can be found at Met 000 39812. Is that it?
Yes.
The third statement for the Metropolitan Police was dated the 18th of February 2019, which can be found at Met 000 39853. Is that it?
Yes.
A fourth statement for the Metropolitan Police was also dated the 18th of February 2019, which can be found at Met 000 65664. And is that it?
Yes.
And there are exhibits which I don't need to take you to, but for the record are at Met 000 65673. And your fifth and final statement from the Metropolitan Police, dated the 25th of March 2019, can be found at Met 000 65666. And is that it?
Yes.
Thank you. And your first statement to the inquiry was dated the 17th of July 2019, and that can be found at TMO 100049875. And is that it?
Yes.
And finally, your second statement is dated the 12th of May 2020, can be found at TMO 008700944. And is that statement?
Yes.
Thank you. Have you read each of those statements recently?
I have, yes.
And can you confirm that they are true?
Yes.
And are you happy for those statements to be taken as your evidence to this inquiry?
Yes.
Thank you. Right. First of all, I'd like to discuss with you your roles and responsibilities whilst you're employed by the TMO. Now, you explained that you were initially employed by the TMO in 2002 as a caretaker. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the title of that role later changed to Estate Services Assistant, or ESA. Is that right?
Yes, but before that it was estate inspector.
Thank you.
With caretakers, then estate inspectors, and then when we moved to the TMO, we became ESAs.
Thank you. Now, you also explained that at the time of the fire, you were ESA for the Lancaster West estate, which included Grenfell Tower. Is that right?
Yes.
For how many buildings were you responsible?
At the time of the fire, it was the whole of the Lanc West, Stage 1 and Stage 3, which was probably probably somewhere in the region of about 12 different buildings.
And how many of those were high-rise residential buildings?
Just a tower.
Now, you also say that you initially worked alongside Robert Regan on the Lancaster West estate, but about 18 months before the fire, you became the sole caretaker ESA for Lancaster West, and therefore Grenfell Tower. Is that a fair summary?
Yes.
Apart from managing the whole estate, did your role change in any way?
Yes, when I first started there, we was basically like normal caretakers, just checking bits and pieces, and then we became estate inspectors. We was raising our own repairs on the computer and the system. Then when the EMB folded and the TMO took over, they took that all away for us and we became basic caretakers again.
Thank you.
Yes, our role did change.
Thank you. Now, we don't need to go to it, but at paragraph 16 of your second inquiry statement, you explain that Keith Stevenson was your direct line manager. Is that right?
He was my supervisor, yeah.
And after he left, you reported directly to Tony O'Hara,
Yes.
Siobhan Rumble, and then Nicola Bartholomew. Is that right?
Yes.
And that your memory was that you reported to Martin Barr for a matter of weeks for the when the Lancaster West Estate Management Board folded, but he then moved south, and so you came under the supervision of Louise Netson-Donye. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, in her evidence, and the reference is TMO 00871-021/7, paragraphs 34 to 35, we don't need to go to it. Nicola Bartholomew said that you reported to her as neighbourhood team leader from May 2016, when she joined the TMO, is that right?
Yes.
Until August 2016, when you reported to Louise Netson-Donye, who was the estate services team leader for the north of the borough.
Yes, that's correct.
And so it would appear that you reported directly to Nicola Bartholomew from May 2016 to August 2016.
Yes.
And Louise Netson-Donye from August 2016 onwards.
Yes.
Thank you. And after the restructure in August 2016, did you have any involvement with Nicola Bartholomew at all?
Not really. Only that she was manager on the Lanc West.
Now, Martin Barr said that having been seconded to a role in the south of the borough, he resumed responsibility for the northern team, as it were.
Yeah.
In around January, February 2017. Does that sound about right to you?
Yes, I know he did come back when he left the south and he came back to the north. He became our team leader. It was for a matter of weeks, probably 4, 5, 6 weeks, and then he left.
And then he left in May 2017, I
Yes.
think. After May 2017, who are you reporting to thereafter?
I think Louise took over again.
Okay, thank you. Now, if we can now look in more detail at your role as a caretaker, inspector, then ESA. Now, in your paragraph 8 of your first statement of the inquiry, you said that generally my duties including conducting regular inspections of all the TMO buildings within my area to check for cleanliness, state of repair, lighting, and general upkeep of these areas. Is that fair?
That's true, yeah.
And at paragraph 9, you go on to say, more specifically, you carried out weekly health and safety inspections where you were required to various features of a building which you list, including, for example, the lifts and communal fire doors. Is
Yeah.
that a fair summary?
Yeah.
Now, was that the summary of your day-to-day role?
Yes, from building to building. We didn't do, well, I didn't do every building every day, so it was certain buildings on certain days.
And as part of that role, would you identify any repairs that were necessary to Repairs Direct?
Yes.
But your role wasn't to carry out the repairs yourself, is that right?
No.
Now, paragraph 13 of the same statement, you say, I would check the communal fire doors as part of my estate inspections to ensure that they were closing properly. However, I did not inspect flat entrance doors other than to check them visually on an ad hoc basis. Putting it differently, is it fair to say that you carried out no internal inspection of the flat entrance doors?
Yeah, we didn't check flat entrance doors.
Now, you say your visual inspection was on an ad hoc basis. What would prompt an ad hoc inspection of them?
If I was in that if I wasn't due in that building on that day, only to deliver letters, then I would check on my way down. That would be an ad hoc.
This may be impossible to answer, but are you able to give the panel a steer as to how frequently in practice you would be inspecting the flat entrance doors of, for example, Grenfell?
Well, I think I was due in that building. I'm not sure if it was once or twice a week, sometimes if I had a spare half hour, I used to pop up and have a quick look. So you could be looking at maybe 2, 3, 4 times a week.
Thank you. Now, is it right that you also carried out monthly health and safety checks
Yes.
of every building on the Lancaster West Estate?
Yes.
Now, we don't need to go to it, but in your first statement for the police on page 2, it's the third paragraph, third line, you say, "We had a defined role that we stuck to on a daily basis. Initially, I would walk around the whole estate 2 to 3 times a day, find any repairs that needed doing, and then in the afternoon, I would send them through to the various contractors." Is it fair to say that this walk around was an informal inspection rather than a more formal health and safety inspection?
Yes. Yeah.
And would you describe it as a basic review?
Yeah.
Now,
And sorry, just help me with this. When you went on your walk around of the estate, did that involve going into any of the buildings?
Sometimes, not all of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if I was due in that building, then yes, I would check the building inside.
Yeah.
If I wasn't due in that building, usually I'd just walk around on the outside because it was quite a big estate.
Yeah. It sounds as though you had a sort of rota for looking at particular buildings on particular days.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
now, you also say in your evidence that you carried out estate inspections every 2 or 3 months, which would take a couple of hours, in which you would walk around the estate with the housing officer, member of the Residents Association, and residents. What was the purpose of those inspections?
That was so that the RA or the residents, if they had picked up on anything, that they could walk around and show us, or even if we was walking around and they noticed something.
Were those inspections regularly carried out up until the date of the fire?
As far as I know, yes.
Was a record kept of those estate inspections?
There should have been, yeah.
Who would have been responsible for keeping those records?
Whoever was the housing officer at the time, I think it was Millicent.
So not you.
No.
Now, you've also mentioned in your first statement to the police at page 4 that, quotes, "on top of doing our own work, we are given FRAs to do," close quotes. Can you explain what you meant by doing FRAs?
Well, we had our own daily routine that we used to do, but then we used to get a load of FRAs come through, and we depending how important they were, some were just minor ones, some were quite important. We used to try and get them sorted out there and then. If not, we'd give it 2 or 3 days to try and sort out.
And so, just put differently, you were carrying out, basically, you were completing, checking recommended actions that had been recommended by Carl Stokes, the TMO's fire risk assessor. Is that a fair way of putting it?
Yeah, we were checking what was on the fire risk assessment. We were checking it, and we was basically getting the orders raised.
Now, we'll come on to that in more detail later on. Now, if I can turn now to the specific topic of Grenfell itself. In respect of the tower, is it right that you carried out your weekly inspection every Friday morning?
Yes, that was when the building was completed and handed back to us, yes.
And how long would that inspection take each Friday morning?
You're probably looking at about an hour and a half sometimes.
And again, would it be fair to characterise those weekly checks as quite basic?
Yeah.
Now, if I can turn to an email that Janice Ray sent you back on the 23rd of May 2017, that can be found at TMO00862170. And you'll see at the very bottom of that page, it was sent at 17:28. Hi, Paul. And if we go over to page 2, could you please advise how frequently you inspect this block? It's Grenfell. Also, on which days of the week, and are those inspections completed AM or PM? Need it for an accident investigation. If we go back to page 1, you replied every Friday AM. And then if we go up further at the top of the page, all blocks once per week. If I'm doing letters, then I give it a little look over. Doing letters, what does that mean?
If sometimes we had letters that needed delivering, so we used to do block letters or individual letters for tenants.
And what was meant by what did a little look over involve?
That was if it wasn't a Friday and it was another day during the week.
So it'd be in addition to your Friday
Yeah,
inspection?
yeah.
Thank you. Now can I turn to the separate topic of training, Mr. Steadman, in particular the fire safety training you received in your role as an ESA. Now, paragraph 6 of your first statement to the inquiry, which can be found at TMO 1004987/2, you say that, and I quote, "I was given a variety of training for this role, including basic fire training, fire safety training, and first aid training. Internal training was usually carried out by TMO's health and safety team, specifically Janice Ray or Adrian Bowman." Now, when you started as a caretaker in 2002, did you receive any specific fire safety training at that point?
Yes, I don't think it was straight away. I think it was a week or a month or two into the job, and then we used to do training.
And can you remember in broad terms what that training involved?
Well, the fire training, I'm not sure if it was half day or full day training, but it was a series of, we used to sit down with the guy that used to do the training. He was a fireman or an ex-fireman, and he used to show us all videos and stuff of what fire extinguishers to use, what fire extinguishers not to use on liquids, and it was a good training course.
I'm assuming that the former fireman wasn't Carl Stokes, given that we're talking about 2002.
No.
Thank you. Now, after 2002, do you recall how often you received any further fire safety training?
I'm not sure if it was once a year or once every 2 years.
And how long would each training session take?
Again, I think the first ones, sometimes you done it for half a day, sometimes you done it for a whole day. So I think it varied from year to year.
And what form did the training take? For example, was it online? Was it a...
No, it was in a room and outside, putting fires out as well.
And who would provide that training? Would it be this former fireman?
Yeah.
Can you give the panel a broad idea of what topics the fire safety training would involve?
The topic it used to be he showed us a series of video clips of our fire start. He showed us the video clip of I think it was the Bradford football ground. He showed us that and the build up of how the fire actually started. It was all sorts of videos.
Did the training involve assisting with evacuation or anything of that nature? Thinking of the Bradford example you were given.
Yes, yeah.
Once it came into force, were you given any training on the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005?
Not that I know of, no.
Were you given any training on published guidance, for example, something entitled Local Government Associations, Fire Safety and Purpose-Built Blocks of Flats? Does that ring any bells?
No.
Now, we don't need to go to anything further in your statements, but beyond these sort of annual or biannual sessions, do you recall any other fire safety training you were provided with?
No.
Now, can you remember being shown the TMO's fire safety strategy at any stage?
No.
Now, if I can take you to one document, which is TMO 100-17036/14. Now, just to tell you what this is the TMO's fire safety strategy dated June 2017. And in respect of fire safety training for the TMO staff at section 21 at the bottom of that page, it says this, and I quote, "To increase knowledge, awareness and promote competence amongst staff, the TMO requires all staff to complete a comprehensive online fire safety training course." Now, at the time of the fire, had you been provided with any online fire safety training?
It's possible, but I don't recall it, no.
Can we turn over the page? And the second line from the top starts with the words "further." And I quote, "Further, staff who are required to undertake regular communal inspections are also given additional, more specialised training to cover fire safety systems and features in residential blocks, stay-put strategy, communal storage issues, other issues highlighted by the FRAs, etc., to ensure they are clear on what to escalate. This training is also provided annually." Now, at the time of the fire, do you remember receiving any, quote, specialised, close quotes, training?
No.
Before 2017, do you recall, as is suggested here, annual training as opposed to twice yearly training?
I think it. I don't recall it. No.
Were you ever provided with any fire safety training by Janice Ray or Adrian Bowman?
Not that I can recall. No.
Now, if we can stay on this page and go to and look at the end of paragraph 21, which is the one at the very top of the page, it states that, quotes, "ongoing refresher training at team meetings and on-site briefings with the health and safety team and the fire consultant." Did you have team meetings with the estate services team?
Yes, we had team meetings regularly on Link West. Yeah.
And who would attend those meetings?
Most of the staff.
Would Janice Ray or any of the health and safety team attend?
Only if they needed to speak about something, they would turn up.
And how often would the meetings take place?
I think it was every month.
And during those meetings, did you receive any refresher or updating fire safety training?
No.
Was the focus on practical things such as getting repairs done or raising profile of certain matters?
Yes.
Did Janice Ray ever meet the estate services team to give instruction on or to emphasise the importance of fire safety as part of the ESA role?
She might have come down, if she was down on from time to time, she might have mentioned something, but I can't remember.
Can you remember whether she gave you any direction or emphasised the importance of particular aspects of fire safety that were important to your role as an ESA?
No.
Apologies for asking this question. It's one lawyers tend to, but can you remember receiving any specific training on high-rise buildings and fire safety in high-rise buildings in 2010?
No.
Can you remember, sorry, just to test you on it, see whether it jogs your memory. I realise it's more than 11 years ago, so apologies for that. But there was a meeting held with neighbourhood officers, community officers and ESAs following a session of fire safety training, but it was bespoke to high-rise buildings. Do you remember anything of that sort 10 or 11 years ago?
No, I can't remember that.
Now, could we look at some ESA fire safety training that took place on the 2nd December 2016, and that can be found at TMO 100489994. There we go, it sets out the objectives. And if we could go to page 3, we find a slide dedicated to the fire at Adair Tower on the 31st of October 2015. I'll just let you briefly read that so you can recall the basic details. Now, was this training session on the 2nd December 2016 the first time you'd received training on the circumstances of and lessons learned from the Adair Tower fire?
Possibly, yes.
Can we look further in this slide show to page 24? And we see there communal doors, flat entrance doors, ESA responsibilities. And if we turn over the page to page 25, 26 and 27, now each of those 3 photos shows damaged flat entrance doors. Can you remember now whether you were told that it was your responsibility to inspect flat entrance doors, either as a result of the Adair Tower or to re-emphasise what you've been required to do anyway?
I probably was, but it would only have been a visual check, not actually checking the door, because 9 times out of 10, if you're going to knock on the door, someone's either not going to be in or they're not just not going to answer.
So before the Adair Tower fire, as I understand your evidence from what you said earlier, you were inspecting flat entrance doors anyway?
We was inspecting flat entrance doors, but it was just visually from the outside.
Now, can you remember during this training session on the 2nd of December 2016 whether there was any discussion about inspecting self-closing devices on flat entrance doors?
I think there was. I think they wanted us to check them, but how are we going to check them if they're built into the door?
Were you given any advice on how to inspect them?
No.
During this session, did people raise any practical reservations about how you could check self-closing devices and what advice you were seeking and to allow you to inspect them?
I can't recall, but they probably did. They probably just mentioned what I mentioned, because the 9 times out of 10, especially the doors they had on Grenfell Tower, I think they're called Perco door closers, and they're actually built into the doors, and the only way you can check them is if the door's open.
Do you remember during this training session whether you or any of your colleagues raised some scepticism as to how frequently or indeed effectively you can inspect self-closing devices?
I'd imagined most of them probably said something about it, yes.
You say I'd imagine. Can you help us? Did they or didn't?
More than likely, yes.
Now, I don't know whether this helps. A quiz was prepared for the purpose of this training. If we go to this quiz, it's TMO 100-49868. I don't know whether that looks familiar. But if we go to the final page, which is page 3, and in particular question 14, which is the last one, that asks, what repairs should you report in relation to doors, both flat entrance doors and communal area doors? Now, from the training in respect to flat entrance doors, what repairs should you have been reporting?
In any damage to the door, any letterbox missing or damaged. If the door closer was on the outside and that wasn't working properly, or if it didn't look right, and then report that.
Can you help us, just following on from that, how were defects in flat entrance doors recorded following your weekly inspections, for example?
We used to have we got an app on our phone that we get all our jobs through, and we used to be able to raise the repairs on the app, or you could do it on the computer or phone customer services direct.
That's useful. And following on from that point, can we then look at the inspection process itself, therefore, and in particular within the context of health and safety inspections of Grenfell Tower? And in the first instance, could I ask you to turn to TMO 100-28449? Now, does that front page look familiar to you?
Yeah.
Now, were you ever provided with your own copy?
I don't recall it, no.
Would you have a room where you could store your equipment and records? Would a copy of this reference book be kept there?
More than likely, yes. Yeah, it would have been in the office somewhere.
Would it be, you're giving the impression that it's not something to which you regularly referred. Is that a fair impression to take from your evidence?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be clutching this book as you were going around carrying out your inspections. Is that also fair?
Yeah, that's fair, yeah.
Now, I should say it's dated June 2013. And if we go to page 83 within this document, it's internal 75, but 83 for the purposes of Opus. And there you see inspections routine checklist. Does that look familiar?
Yes.
Would you routinely use that checklist when you're carrying out your various inspections?
We would have used that before we got the app on our phone. We had the app put on our phone, I think it was around about 2015, so we would have been using sheets like that up until then.
And routinely as well?
Yeah.
And so you'd complete it every time you carried out a daily inspection or a weekly inspection?
Daily, usually weekly, but if daily, yes.
Now, if I can ask you to go put this document to one side and go to TMO 1004985/2. There we go. And if we can go to paragraph 7, this is your first statement of inquiry in the 4th line. Just following on from the answers you've given, you there refer to the PDA device.
Yeah.
You say, I was also given a PDA device by the TMO, which was programmed with all of the checks that I needed to make. For each item that needed to be checked, I would click yes or no on my PDA to confirm that the particular item had been checked. Years ago, before we were given PDAs, we would record the results of our inspections by hand and then input them into a computer program. And so that's just to sort of give you context for the answers you've just given. That remains a fair, accurate and summary of your evidence. Just to clarify a matter, when you started using the PDAs, did you stop using the checklist that we looked at, taken from the ESA's reference book?
Yes.
And you started using the PDA, if I recall your evidence rightly, in or about 2015?
I think it was round about there, yeah.
Now, if we stay within this statement and go on to page 3 in paragraph 17, in the last sentence of that paragraph you say this: while the monthly health checks were slightly more involved than the weekly checks, in reality they were undertaken in much the same way. Can you help us? In what ways were the monthly checks slightly more involved?
We used to go around checking, at that time, when on the PDA, we used to go around checking fire extinguishers, fire alarms, door closers. Everything got checked properly rather than just like a weekly check. Everything got checked properly on a monthly.
And how long would that monthly check take?
If we're talking Grenfell Tower, you're probably looking at about 2 to 3 hours.
Now, if we stay within this statement but turn to page 5 and paragraph 29, so at the bottom of the page you say this: the only concern I recall raising was whether we had too much work to do. However, this would never stop me conducting my fire safety checks thoroughly, as I consider them to be very important. And if we hold that statement in mind and turn to another one, which is the first statement to the police, which can be found at MET 000398144/4, and 5 lines from the top, in the middle of the line, you say this: I feel that some of the caretakers have to fit in too much work for their day to allow. One caretaker has 40 blocks. The TMO only allow the caretakers 30 to 60 minutes to check everything. The fire checks require you to inspect everything, such as the fire doors and emergency lighting. Now, does your statement there reflect the position that you experienced before the fire?
Yes.
Now, what checks did the 30 to 60 minute allowance apply to? Was it the weekly or the monthly checks?
Both.
Who set that allowance of 30 to 60?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
But you're clear it was a set allowance?
Yeah.
Do you know why it was set?
Basically, the reason why it's set, because they never replaced the caretakers that retired or left over the years. So over the years, the caretakers have got less and less, so the workload has got more and more. So you have to get through your blocks each day.
Now, following on from that, was the set allowance of 30 to 60 minutes sufficient for you to carry out the checks to the standard that was required?
On some blocks, yes, some smaller blocks,
Would Grenfell be one of the larger blocks then?
yes.
And did you ever raise concerns with anyone that you had insufficient time to complete the necessary checks in relation to Grenfell?
All the time.
And with whom did you raise those concerns?
Line managers, supervisors, whoever.
So that would be Louise Netzendonyi
Yeah,
and Nicola Bartholomew,
yeah,
Martin Barr.
yep.
And how would you raise them? Would it be in conversation, or would it be phone calls, or would it be email?
It's usually raised in a one-to-one,
And when were those one-to-ones?
monthly.
Did they do much about the concerns that you raised?
No.
Were you a lone voice, or did any of your other colleagues make the same point?
We all had the same voice.
Did you ever collectively raise your concerns with anyone more senior at the TMO, for example, Janice Ray or anyone else?
Not to Janice Ray, no, but to when we had caretakers meetings and the whole caretakers turned up, then yes, we raised it.
Now, if we can stay in this particular statement given to the Metropolitan Police and go to page 5 and the first paragraph on that page. You say there, and I quote, "Things were a bit more relaxed before Carl Stokes was used, but that was then when the pressure was put on the caretakers and they had more work to do. We did tell them that we just couldn't cope with our own job, the FRAs, the meter readings, the walkabouts and the inspections, and we would only work 7 hours a day. We've been complaining to the TMO for the last 4 or 5 years that we haven't got enough time or enough people, but they just don't listen." And so it would seem from that you'd been raising concerns on that evidence since at least 2012, 2013. Is that fair and accurate?
Yeah.
Now, if I can turn to a slightly different but related topic, and that's reporting issues identified during inspections. Now, can I ask you to turn to your first statement to the inquiry, which is at TMO 100-49875/2 and paragraph 10. And you say there, and I quote, "I would also report any repairs that were identified by myself or the residents to repairs direct." And holding that in mind, can we go to your second statement to the inquiry, which is at TMO 00870-944/2 and paragraph 8. And we see at the end of the first line, you explain that if you identified a repair, you would raise a repair request by completing an electronic form on the PDA. And then towards the end of that paragraph, you say you would receive, quotes, an email saying that the repair had been raised and when it was due to be completed by, close quotes. Would you receive confirmation of when a repair had been completed?
No.
Would you be required to check if a repair was completed?
Yes.
Who would check the repair had been carried out satisfactorily?
Me.
And how did you check that all the repairs you'd identified had been completed and satisfactorily?
If I wasn't happy with it, and then I would have phoned through and said that it's not been done properly, it needs a recall. But prior to that, going back a few years to that, we had about 7 or 8 surveyors that used to do pre-inspections and post-inspections on repairs. So, but then when they got rid of them and only kept, I think it was only kept 1 or 2 surveyors, that was then when we had to go around and post-inspect.
Can you remember when, to quotes, they got rid of the surveyors rather?
That was I'll be honest with you, I can't be 100%. I think it may have been 2014, 15, 12. I can't remember.
Now, in addition to raising repairs, 4 repairs direct, which were identified during your inspection, I should say, paragraph 28 of your first statement to the inquiry, we don't need to go to it. You say, if I knew of any minor fire safety issues, I would bring these to Carl's attention. First of all, what sort of minor fire safety issues arose that you brought to his attention?
If there was anything I wasn't too unsure about, and then if he was around, I would speak to him about it.
If he wasn't around, what would you do?
Health and safety.
Janice Ray, in other words.
Or Adrian, yeah.
How would you report it to them? Would it be by email, a call, or what?
It's usually it could be either. If it was something that they needed to look at, I probably would have took a picture and sent them an email or a phone call.
How frequently was Carl Stokes around?
On the Lancaster West, he was round probably, I don't know, probably once a month, once every 2 months.
Can you give, though, the panel an idea of the sort of fire safety issues you thought necessary to raise, either with Adrian or Janice or Carl Stokes? To give a flavour, really asking you to give a flavour to the panel of what you thought
I'll be honest with you, I can't think of anything at the moment that I did report. I don't know, it probably would have been things like if we had... We had garages under Tenant and Hurstway Walk. Some of them garages were empty. We used to get a lot of fly tipping down there, wood, clothing and stuff like that. Would it be okay to leave? If OCS were a bit busy and they couldn't move it straight away, would it be okay to leave it there for a couple of days and then get it removed?
Do you recall whether there was a formal procedure for escalating health and safety concerns to Adrian Bowman or Janice Ray?
Not that I can remember, no.
Was it an informal process from the sounds of it?
Yeah.
And it's what you've just described?
Yeah.
And would those issues be recorded in any document, either by you or by health and safety?
If I sent them by an email, then yes, it would have been documented. If it was a phone call, then no, I probably just made a little note of it just to remind myself that I did phone Adrian or Janice.
And presumably you would know whether it had been done or not done satisfactorily. You picked that up on one of your inspections or walk-arounds?
Yeah.
Now, can I turn to a separate topic, which is monitoring of inspections? And could I ask you to turn to your second statement of the inquiry, which can be found at TMO 00870-944/3 and paragraph 16. Thank you. You set out there the reporting line. Just refresh your memory of that and anyone watching. But did your managers monitor your inspections in any way?
Yeah, I think they did. Yeah.
Did each of the managers there identified inspect or monitor your inspections?
As far as I know, yes. Yeah.
And how would they do that?
They'd probably ask me if I had to do something, or they'd probably go around on their own and have a walk around and check to make sure.
And from 2015 onwards, did they check your PDA reports?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure. In fact, we don't even know where that used to go once it got sent off.
It disappeared off into the ether?
Yeah.
You indicated earlier that sometimes they'd accompany you on inspections, your walk-arounds. How often would that happen?
Probably once every couple of months they'd come around with us.
And what would there be any outcome from these monitoring exercises? Would they say, good job, or you could do more on this, or I wasn't happy about X or Y?
I think it was reflected in the one-to-ones.
And again, would you have one-to-ones with each of those managers during their respective times supervising you?
Yes, Martin, I think, if I remember rightly, I only ever had one-to-one with Martin, because that was when he had left. Tony, I'm not too sure about. Siobhan and Nicola, it was probably only a couple, and then that was when Martin and Louise took over, so yeah.
And how frequently would those one-to-ones happen? Would they be rare events, or would there be a fixed weekly?
No, they was usually once a month.
Did fire safety feature prominently or at all in any of those one-to-ones?
Yes, yeah.
And what types of fire safety concerns would be discussed?
Just mainly fire doors, door closers, exit doors, fire exit doors in the garages of Barrington, Hurstway and Testerton.
And were they in reinforcing during these discussions the importance of you staying on top of these issues, or was it more of a monitoring exercises to check that you picked up X, Y, or Z issues?
No, it was important that we stayed on top of it.
Now, could I ask you to turn to TMO 100-47147? Now, this is the front page of a performance review carried out on the 25th of November 2016 in relation to you, Mr. Steadman. Now, at that stage, November 2016, presumably Louise Netson-Donye would have completed the form. Is that right?
Yes.
Now, if we can turn to page 6 within this document, and we'll see against the work objective headed health and safety at the bottom left-hand corner, we see that in the achievement against objectives, it says this: Paul has achieved 95.24% from August, the second quarter, but I'm not sure how accurate this is, as no repairs have been recorded and sent through from August to date. Paul says that he's been sending them through, so I'll check this with IT. Paul needs to escalate things when he sees them currently. Paul is raising the orders, but is not chasing them if they are not getting completed. For example, on a walkabout I did of Grenfell Tower, there are numerous lights out as problems with some of the door closures. Paul need to take more ownership for communal repairs and for removal of items from the communal areas on the estate. Now, I suppose the first question is, were you raising repairs from your inspections?
Yes.
Now, it is suggested there that you had not reported a number of broken lights and problems with door closers. Did you accept that as being a fair and accurate criticism?
Well, yes and no, because I was always taught by my first line manager, Keith Stevenson, that when you come to putting lights out, don't put, if you've only got one or two lights that are out and it's not dark, don't put them out, because it costs too much money to spend to get that one or two lights repaired. If you put 7, 8, 9, 10 lights out at a time, it's cheaper than putting one or two out at a time. So she's not actually stating how many lights were out. It could have been one, could have been two.
Where did you feel that she was making fair criticism? You said yes and no. Where was she making fair criticism?
Probably where the lights were out, I should have put them in, but then I'm going back to when I first started of my old supervisor not putting one or two lights in at a time.
Now, that's lights. She also identifies some issues regarding door closers. Do you think she was making a fair criticism in that respect?
It depends where. Did she say what block she was on?
Well, we're both looking at the same thing, and you were at the meeting with her, so you have the advantage
Right.
on all of us in respect to the latter.
I mean, she could be fair. I don't know. It could be fair criticism.
Did you accept that you were not chasing outstanding orders that you had raised?
The thing is, when you start chasing orders, you're on the phone 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a week, chasing one job. And it does get a bit mind-blowing at the time.
And so, taking from that, you seem to accept an element of fair criticism about it.
Yeah, I'll accept that, yeah.
Now, if we can turn over the page on page 7, and we see estate inspections objective, it's below the halfway mark on the left-hand side. It's recorded in the achievements against objectives box on the right-hand side. this. Currently, Paul does not do estate inspections like the other ESAs, but from the end of November, he will be accompanying Nikki and I on the walkabout with the RA. The RA being Residents Association, presumably.
Yes.
This is so that Paul can explain what jobs he has raised or raise any jobs that the RA bring to his attention. The walkabout will be happening every 3 weeks on a Thursday. Do you know what was meant by the comment that you do not do inspections like other ESAs?
Yeah, I think that was the other ESAs. They used to do 3 monthly walkabouts on specific blocks with the RA, and we never used to do that so much on Lanc West.
Why was that?
I don't know. I mean, from time to time we used to have a walk around, and you'd probably get 4 or 5 residents or RA members turn up, and then another month you'd get no one turn up. So basically, you was on your own.
Presumably, the Nikki referred to there, is that Nicola Bartholomew?
I'll take it is, yeah.
Did you start accompanying her on the walkabout with the Residents Association from the end of November 2016 onwards?
I believe so, yeah.
And did they take place at 3 weekly intervals?
Yeah, they should have done, yeah.
Well, did they rather than should have done?
Yeah.
Now, staying on this page, we see at the bottom left-hand corner handheld device and reporting issues. And reading on the right-hand side, it says this, and I quote, Paul needs to utilise this more. Paul completes his weekly sheets, but there is not enough reporting on it, considering that he is now covering the whole of Lancaster West. I have explained this to Paul and told him if he is having difficulty using the device, then he can let me know and I can help him. Now, again, did you accept that as fair criticism, infrequent use of the PDA?
No, because the app they had on the phone was absolute rubbish, and any of the caretakers will tell you the same thing.
So you weren't using it as
I was using it, but it wasn't. It was a basic, just a tick sheet. Yes, no.
And what were the difficulties that you and the other ESAs were experiencing with the PDA?
Well, reporting repairs, one thing.
And what was the problem? Can you give the panel the idea of what the difficulties you were encountering?
If you was reporting a repair, you'd send it through. You wouldn't get a reply back, so you'd phone customer services to find out what's happened, and they've got nothing at their end. You've got it on your PDA, you've got the number, and you're giving them a number, and they're on the other end of the phone, and they're saying, well, there's no number there, there's nothing.
I suppose what flows from that is this question, is what training were you given on the use of the PDAs?
We was given adequate training. It was the system itself.
And did you make that point to your supervisors as forcibly as you've made it here?
All the time.
So from 2015 onwards?
Yeah.
And what was their response to these comments by you and other ESAs?
Their response probably would have been, oh, we're sorting it.
Was it ever sorted?
No, we got a new app now.
Now,
So your problem, I think you're telling us, was you were logging repairs on your app,
Yeah.
but they weren't turning up at
And
the
they
other
wasn't
end.
going up the other end, yeah.
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 Thank you.
in that comment sheet, it says, do you know what was meant? It says there is not enough reporting, considering that he's now covering the whole of the Lancaster West. Do you know what she meant by that?
I don't know. I think what she's meaning is because I've got more because I've got double the blocks that I'm looking after now, because there's no jobs going through, she's probably wondering why. Well, if there's nothing to report, there's nothing to report.
Presumably, taking it from the evidence you've already given, you did not accept that point as a fair criticism. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now, if we go on to page 9 within this document, and the line manager's summary, it's noted in the first paragraph in the final sentence that you were refusing to escalate communal repairs once you'd reported them. Do you accept that, or did you accept that as a fair criticism?
No, because I was chasing them up.
So you weren't refusing to do
No, I wasn't
the escalation
refusing.
work?
No, I wasn't refusing to chase them up. I was chasing them up.
Now, if I can turn now to a more particular topic, and that's flat entrance doors. Now, we have a spreadsheet of all the repairs ESA's logged between January 2016 and the 14th of June 2017, and for the record, the reference is at CST *00067. Now, we don't need to go to it, but take it from me that that spreadsheet shows that you raised no flat entrance door repairs in that period. Would you accept that as accurate or not?
Yeah.
Why?
Because most of them would have been the Parco ones that were built into the door itself, so I wouldn't have had access to that. And the other ones would have been the door closers, which would have been situated on the inside of the flats.
And so, put differently, you were not in a position where you were able to inspect.
Yeah.
Otherwise, were you doing what you could to inspect flat entrance doors
Yeah.
from a visual appreciation from the outside?
Yes.
And you'd be doing that routinely, is that right?
Yes.
Now, if we can go back to your first statement of the inquiry, which is at TMO 100-49875/3 and paragraph 13, and you say there, I do not know which companies or individuals were responsible for replacing and inspecting the flat entrance doors across the TMO housing stock. Now, were you nevertheless aware that the TMO replaced almost all of the flat entrance doors on tenants' flats at Grenfell between 2011 and 2013?
Yes, I was aware, yeah.
Do you recall any issues arising with the self-closing devices once the flat entrance doors had been replaced?
Yes.
What were those issues?
They was making the doors too heavy.
With the consequence of what?
They were slamming behind. When them doors were first replaced on Grenfell Tower, we had a lot of people locking themselves out because they were taking their rubbish to the bin chute, forgetting to take the key with them, and the door was slamming shut behind them.
And that's what first brought the issue to your attention?
Yes, yeah.
And that would have been obvious to you whilst you're doing your rounds and inspections on the estate?
Yeah.
What did you do about that issue once you were aware?
Well, at that time, there was myself, Robert, Seamus was there, the handyman. I think Keith would have been retired by then, but we all reported it to managers, health and safety. You had a lot of old people that were living in Grenfell Tower, and some of them couldn't even open the doors physically because they was that heavy.
Now, just picking up your reference there to Seamus, that's Seamus Dunley.
Yes.
And we can go to his statement, but I'll summarise it. It can be found at Met 0001959/6. And the third paragraph on that page, he said this in relation to new flat entrance doors, and I quote, "Just after the warranty ran out, the doors started going wrong. They had internal door closers that were pulling out from the door because they had tiny little screws holding them in, and they had a massive fat spring inside." And then he went on to say in the fourth paragraph, final sentence, and I quote, "You can't reattach it because of the fixings, so I would have no alternative but to remove it. I think I did this to about 10 doors." Did Seamus ever discuss the matter in that detail with you or Robert Regan?
He probably did, but I don't recall it, yes.
Can you remember if he probably did? Would he? Just trying to think. Did Robert Regan raise this issue with you? The problems with the door closers on the new flat entrance doors.
Probably not. No.
No. Do you know whether Seamus took any action himself that you're aware of in relation to the issues he'd encountered with respect of self-closing doors devices?
I think the only issues that he took was what you just read out, where they had been pulled away from the door and he couldn't reattach it. The only thing he could do was take the whole thing out.
Did you ever raise the problem specifically with any of your supervisors or indeed Janice Ray or Adrian Bowman?
Yes.
Who?
Probably both Janice and Adrian and managers.
And can you remember, first of all, when you raised it with Janice Ray and Adrian Bowman?
I can't remember when it was, no.
Was it quite soon after the installation programme had been completed in 2013? Or was it slightly later?
It probably was, yeah, probably around about that time. It could have been even just before they finished.
So somewhere in the period of 2012, 2013?
Yeah.
And what did they do about it?
Nothing, I don't think.
Do you remember what you raised and discussed with the supervisors with whom you identified this issue?
No, because I can't remember who I raised it with. I'm not sure if it was who was my supervisor at the time, Louise. I can't remember.
But you raised it with one of the supervisors?
It would have
You're
been,
clear
yeah.
about that?
Yeah.
And did the supervisor do anything about it to the best of your recollection?
No.
Now can I turn to a separate topic, which is inspection of the AOV, the smoke control system. And first of all, I want to talk about the old AOV system, so the pre-2016 version. Had you been involved in maintaining the previous smoke control system that existed before the refurbishment?
Maintaining, you mean fixing?
Yes.
No.
Did you carry out any inspection of any panel?
I remember, I think it was back in 2013, me and Victoria, we used to do the fire alarm test, but not for the AOV. That was just the break glass call bits that we used to set off and reset it.
Now, if we go back to the Estate Staff Quick Reference Handbook, which can be found at TMO 100284449/85. Now we see in the second row on the far left-hand side, it says visual check on any detection, extraction, ventilation in common parts. Sorry, I should have said this is from the daily routine checks checklist. Now, were you carrying out that visual check before the refurbishment of the AOV system?
Yes, but that was just a look. That wasn't.
It's a visual check?
Yeah.
Nothing more than that?
No.
And was that on a daily basis or a weekly basis? Can you remember?
That would probably be on a weekly or a monthly basis.
And did you do anything more beyond what is recommended there on that checklist?
No.
Do you remember your visual check identifying any problem with the AOV system before the refurbishment?
No, because I'm not an engineer, so I wouldn't know whether anything's broken, and unless it's hanging off the wall, then I wouldn't be reporting it. But
That's the thing. It's in the context you're carrying out a visual check.
Yeah.
But carrying out that visual check is your evidence that you never had cause to raise any concern or repair arising.
No.
Were you aware of the detail of the maintenance of the previous AOV system and its requirements and who was doing it?
I know there was a company that used to come round. I'm not sure if it was every month or every 3 months and test it.
And so nothing more than the regularity?
No.
Do you remember any issues arising from those checks being raised with you thereafter?
No.
Now, if I can ask you to go to LFB 000032101. Now, this is a notice of deficiency served by the London Fire Brigade on the 24th of March 2014, following an inspection at Grenfell Tower. And if we go to page 3, and we see at the bottom, left-hand box, Article 21. And then we see in the middle column, second sentence on the third line, it says this: staff on site did not appear familiar with actions to be taken in response to the fire safety system, alarm and indicator panels situated in and around the reception area. At the time of audit, a detector in an adjacent block had been sent into pre-alarm mode as indicated on the AOV activation alarm panel. However, no action had been taken to investigate. If we go back up to page 3, the action recommended by the LFB was to implement review training program to ensure employees receive adequate fire safety training. Now, first question is this: had you received any training on the AOV system before March 2014?
I think when Victoria and myself started doing the checks in 2013. I think we had checks. I think we done training for the fire panel, but that's all I remember.
Were you familiar with the control panel display itself?
I wasn't over familiar with it. No, all I was taught was how to set off the brake glass box and to reset. That was it. Silence and reset. That was all.
And beyond that, you did not know how to remedy any errors identified on the display panel?
No.
On the control panel, I should say.
No.
Were you provided with any further training or any refresher training after March 2014 in relation to the AOV system?
Not that I can recall. No.
And can I take it from the answers you've given that you have no prior experience of maintenance of AOV systems at all?
No.
Can I now turn to look at the operation of the new AOV system? And for that purpose, can I ask you to turn back to your first witness statement to this inquiry, which can be found at TMO 100-49875/4 and paragraph 22. And you say in the first line this: after the refurbishment, we were shown how to test the smoke detection and extraction AOV system. And you go on at paragraph 23 at the bottom of the page to say this: I can remember asking the question during training of whether it was necessary for me to check the smoke extract or system on every floor. However, I was told that it was not necessary, as it would show on the ground floor if there were any issues with the system on any other floor. I cannot remember who gave this training now, but I can recall that myself, Seamus Dunley and Claire Williams of the TMO were present. Now, looking first at the training element of that, I can take you to it, but there's an email from David Hughes of Regan, dated the 25th of April 2016, inviting you and others to witness the operation of the AOV on the 28th of April 2016. Mm-hmm. Did you attend that demonstration?
Yes.
Now, I'm afraid there's another email, and I will take you to this one, TMO 100-21350. And this is an email you'll see at the bottom of this page from Claire Williams. And this is October 2016, addressed to you and Seamus. You're being invited to a demonstration of the panels for the heating, smoke system and roof-mounted equipment so that you are aware what needs doing on a monthly, regular basis. Did you attend that demonstration in October 2016?
I'm not sure. I know I attended once. I'm not sure whether it's the first one you mentioned or this one.
So you don't know whether it was April or...
But I know it wasn't long after Grenfell Tower got handed back to the TMO after the refurbishment. So it was probably that same week that we done that training, and whatever month that was, I can't remember.
Put differently, did you attend one or two demonstrations?
I attended one.
Now, did the demonstration you attended include an explanation of how the system worked?
Yes, but that went straight over my head.
That was my next question. Was it clear from the demonstration how to operate the system? Could you have operated it?
The smoke vent system, yes, I was able to test it, yes.
Were you given any hands-on training, i.e. were you allowed to push the buttons?
Yes.
Do you recall who told you during the training that you did not need to check smoke extraction and the system on every floor?
Yes, that was the guy that done the training. I believe he worked for the company that fitted the extraction system.
So it was a man, but you don't remember his name?
Yeah, he worked for, I think it was JS Wright or something, the company that fitted it. He worked for them. He was the actual guy that fitted the system in.
Thank you. Now, the local fire station manager, called Andrew Walton, said in his statement to the inquiry, and it's paragraph 13, and can be found at LFB 000233654/4. We don't need to go to it. But he said, in respect to the demonstration on the 28th of April 2016, which he attended, he said this: I remember that during this conversation, it was stated to us that the building's caretaker lived locally, and if there ever was a fire at the building, they would know this and attend, probably arriving at the same time as the crews, and would be able to give guidance or operate the system as necessary. I think the caretaker was present during the demonstration. I think he may have been the person who stayed at the panel during the demonstration to operate the system. I think I suggested the caretaker's contact details should be attached to the instructions to be placed with the panel. Now, the demonstration you attended, do you remember the station manager attending?
I don't remember him, but I know there was a few people there. There was myself, Seamus, Claire Williams, I think it was the two Simons from Ryden's, the guy that was showing us the training. There was a few other people, so it's possible, yeah, that he was there.
I think I'm right in recalling from when he gave evidence, but he had a Liverpudlian accent. Does that prompt your memory at all?
More than likely, then yes.
So it's more. If he was the one there, then it's. Would you accept that it appears that you attended the demonstration in April?
Yeah.
Do you recall it being said that you would attend the tower if a fire occurred and would assist the LFB with guidance as to the operation of the AOV system?
I live about 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes away from Grenfell Tower, providing I wasn't out or whatever, I probably would have attended if there was a fire and they needed assistance, yeah.
Do you recall that being said that you would attend? I'm putting it more...
more than likely, yes.
Was that your expectation that you would attend in the event of a fire?
I probably would have done anyway, yes.
Was that an instruction, though, from the TMO that you would?
It's not an instruction, no, it wasn't an instruction, it was just asking.
Now, could I ask us to turn to a separate document, which is RYD 000 94315/7. Now, this is an FRA significant action plan prepared by Carl Stokes, but upon which Regan had expressed comments. Now, Regan's comments are those set out on the far right-hand side. And if we see item 19D, that's D for Delta, below halfway point, and we see it starts on the far left and reading across. It says in the middle column, in respect to the AOV, this: the keys to manually operate the individual AOV override devices should be freely available for use by the fire service if needed. And then we see in the next column, it says CW to check, Claire Williams. Then Regan have commented in the far right column will be fitted next to fire panel. Now, is the fire panel the same as the AOV control panel in your understanding?
I think so, yes.
Would it be anything else?
No, I don't think it could be anything else.
Were keys provided next to the fire panel?
Not next to the fire panel, no. They was in a separate room.
And only in that separate room?
Yes.
And where was that separate room in relation to the fire panel?
There was a bin chute room outside the tower. There was a key safe in there with a key fob that next to where the file panel was on inside. There was a door to go into the community rooms. You open the door up, and then I believe there was some sort of box on the wall that everything was in there that they needed.
Now, the room in which that box was contained, was that room locked or not?
I'll be honest with you, I can't remember. It probably was. There was probably a key attached to the key fob to get into the first door.
And who would have held the keys to that door? Would it have been you as ESA?
No, we would have had copies of them in our office, and then there would have been a copy for the locked door. If it was locked, there would have been a copy attached to the key fob to get through the first door.
And who would have had the key fob for the first door?
That would have been in the key safe if anyone had to come down over the weekend, if there was a problem over the weekend.
And in the event of a fire, you would have had access to that?
I would have had access to that, yeah.
And so put differently, you wouldn't have needed to have gone to the office to get the key into the room?
No.
Was there any other place where the key was kept?
Not that I know of, no. It was just the office and the key safe box.
Thank you. Sir, I don't know whether it's 11:15, whether this would be an appropriate time.
Is it convenient to you?
It would be very convenient for me.
Right. Mr. Steadman, we have a break during the morning and the afternoon, and it sounds as though this is a convenient time to take it, so we'll do that. We'll stop now. We'll resume at 11:30, please.
Yeah.
And I have to ask you not to talk to anyone about your evidence or anything relating to it while you're out of the room. All right?
Yeah.
So would you like to go with the usher,
Yeah,
please?
sure.
She'll look after you. Right, 11:30.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Yes, would you ask Mr. Steadman to come back in, please? Good. All right, Mr. Steadman?
Yeah.
Ready to carry on?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Kinnear?
Thanks, sir. May we now turn on to the question of weekly check you carried out on the AOV system. Now, if I could ask you to turn to MET 000-39814/7, which is the 7th page of your first statement to the police. You say at the end of the first line this: I know that the automatic ventilation openers were working because I tested them the Friday before the fire. I used to test them every Friday morning. In relation to the fire alarm test, I would contact a call centre called Tunstall to advise them that I was going to do a test which involved spraying canned smoke onto one of the fire detectors. I would let the system run for a minute or two. I would then reset it. Any problems would show on the alarm panel. I would call them again when the test was complete. If the alarm did ever activate, it would go to Tunstall, who would contact the fire brigade. Now, at PCS 1, which can be found at MET 000-65673/1, you exhibit a document entitled Estate Services Monthly Checks at Grenfell Tower. There we go. Now, if we can turn to page 4, this details checks to be carried out on the AOV and states that it is to be done weekly. Now, did you carry out weekly inspections?
Yes.
And did you follow the instructions set out in this Estate Services Monthly Checks guide when
Yes.
you did so?
Yes.
Would you have a copy with you when you did it?
No, because I knew how to reset the panel. That picture that you're showing me there, I have no idea what that is. I think I did ask at the time, but I don't think that anyone came back with an answer.
Did your lack of knowledge of what that photograph indicated frustrate, hinder or stop you from carrying out weekly tests?
No, 'cause I wasn't shown or told what that. I think someone might have mentioned what it was for, but I can't remember what it's for.
Well, just for the sake of completeness, the relevant extracts of this guide are between pages 4 and 6. So if I could ask us to turn over the page 5. There we go. What does that photograph show?
That's the fire panel that I used.
Thank you. And if we turn over the page. You'll see that the top photo, Grenfell Tower smoke extract system. What does that sign show?
That I think, if I remember rightly, I think that was showing you something about the location on what floors something or other was. I never used to look at that.
Now, beyond the information contained in the 3 pages we've just looked at, were you provided with any other guidance as to how to check the AOV system?
We were shown how to test the AOV system and reset it. The other stuff that you're showing me, this picture at the bottom was, I think that's the water pumps.
It is. I'm not asking you questions about that. I'm just asking you about the top one. Don't worry. Now, can I ask us to turn to a separate document, which is at TMO 100333005, and that should be entitled Grenfell Tower Smoke Extract System, and that appears to be a cleaner version of the photograph we've just been looking at, and it provides on the left-hand side a basic how-to-use guide. Do you recognise that document?
Yes.
Were you ever provided with a separate handheld copy?
Possibly, but there was that copy in with the fire panel anyway, so I wouldn't have needed it.
And again, just for the avoidance of doubt, did you use this basic how-to-use guide when you were carrying out your various checks?
Yes.
Was there any maintenance element to the checks that you carried out, or was it simply inspection and carrying out the test you've identified in your statement to the police?
No, it was just simply inspect and check that it was working.
Now, when did the weekly checks of the smoke extract system begin?
I if I remember rightly, I think it was either the week that the building got handed back to the TMO, or it's possible that it could have been the week after.
Thank you. Did anyone else carry out the weekly check?
I believe Seamus Dunley done it 2 or 3 times when I wasn't there on a Friday, but apart from that, I don't think anyone.
Would Seamus be the one who covered you when you were away?
Yes.
Why did you run the system only for a couple of minutes? Why not shorter or longer?
I don't know. I was told just run it for 30 seconds, but I used to run it for 1 or 2 minutes.
And who gave you the 30 seconds guide?
It was probably the guy that was showing us how to do it, the guy that was doing the training.
The man from JS,
Yes.
right? Now, this check confirmed that the detection was working, but did you check whether the fans actually extracted the smoke?
No, because that wouldn't have been my test.
And was it something you were ever advised to do, either by the man from JS Right or by
No.
anyone else?
No.
Now, when you say, and you said this earlier in evidence, that it wasn't necessary to check on each floor because it would show on the ground floor, if there were any issues with the system, does that show up on the building management system control panel that we were looking at?
That would have showed up on the panel, yeah.
And how would it display? Would it be a red light?
I'm not sure, because there was never ever a problem when I had tested it, so I wouldn't know how it showed up.
When you carried out your inspections, did you ever notice dampers being open or closed when this did not tally with what was displayed on the control panel?
No.
Would you ever check other floors to the one you were testing to see whether the control panel was correct and the dampers had, in fact, closed?
Not when I was doing it. If the system was running, then no, but then I would go up and check on the way down, but there was never a problem.
Following from that, did you always test the same floor or change the floor each week?
I was told to test. You can test from the same system, from the same sensor.
So the same floor was used each week?
Ground floor, yeah, where the lift lobby area.
Did you ever test the override switches on each floor using the keys?
No,
Why not?
because I was never told to, and I never had the key for him anyway.
Do you know who did?
No,
Did you check on the environmental function of the system?
no,
Did you note any occasion when the system did not operate as intended?
no.
How did you record the outcome of your weekly checks of the smoke extraction system?
I think the first app that we had on our phone that we was getting our jobs through, I don't think there was anything on there that I could fill in to send away. There was no papers to fill in, no book to sign or nothing. So the only proof that I got that I checked it every Friday was Tunstall, if they made a note of it.
And was it weekly as opposed to monthly testing because that's what you've been told to do by
Yes.
JS Right?
It did start out, I think they did mention first every 2 weeks, but then someone mentioned, no, they wanted it done every week.
Now, Mr. Steadman, may I make a plea on behalf of the shorthand writer? She has to capture both my question and your answer.
Yeah.
And to do that, would you mind waiting for the question to end? I know there's a horrible temptation to get the answer out, but if you can resist the temptation, that'd be much appreciated. Now, can I turn to THL quadruple 0 treble 02, which is the Tunstall alarm log for Grenfell, and it was printed on the 24th of July 2017. And if we go to page 3, that is a log of the alarm calls received by Tunstall. And if we could go maybe 10 or 11 lines down from the top, that included smoke detector calls on Friday the 9th of June at 10:21 and Friday the 2nd of June 2017 at 10:08. And for both these calls, the reason recorded is test engineer Warden. Doing the best you can now, were those calls made by you?
No.
They are Friday mornings, both the 9th and the 2nd of June.
It's possible, yeah. Friday mornings would have been me.
And you would have been on the ground floor then, bearing in mind the answer you previously gave?
Yeah.
Do you recall what happened when you sprayed smoke on those dates, i.e. the 2nd and 9th of June?
No, as far as I know, I sprayed the smoke, it tripped it off, I left it running and reset it.
Now, can we turn to just 3 particular issues that were encountered with the AOV in 2017? And if I could turn, first of all, to LAK, quadruple 0144, which hopefully is a job entry sheet a job sheet entry for the 13th of April 2017 by Robert Officer of Allied Protection. And in that record, he states that he visited Grenfell on the 13th of April 2017 at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock to carry out a quarterly fire service. First of all, were you familiar with that exercise, i.e. someone from Allied Protection would turn up?
No.
Did you have any, would it flow from that, therefore, that you had no contact or communication with them?
No, not that I recall, no.
So you were wholly unaware that quarterly inspections were made by Allied Protection?
Yeah.
Now, in the job sheet itself, in the comments section, so you see it's towards the right-hand side of that sheet, Mr. Officer refers to being unable to test the AOV system because it required the caretaker Paul to be on site to switch the extractors on and to switch off the line to Tunstall, referred to there as the alarm centre. And it goes on to say this, and I quote, "Can't test AOV until next week Tuesday, as the AOV is link the main boiler room and switches them off when AOV are activated. Requires the caretaker Paul to be on site to switch them extractors on, which controls boiler room as buildings recently had a refurb. Also, AOV is linked to alarm centre and requires to be switched offline by the caretaker. Make future appointment with Paul the caretaker or Seamus the maintenance guy for this site." Can we take it, therefore, that Mr. Officer did not liaise with you about a further appointment on the following Tuesday?
I'll be honest with you, I can't recall it, no.
Can we turn on to a second particular incident involving a Barry McAuliffe on the 15th of May 2017? The reference for the job sheet entry is LAK quadruple 0522/2. Now, on the 15th of May 2017, Barry McAuliffe, also from Allied Protection, attended the tower, and in his statement, which is on the sheet on the screen now, in paragraph 8, on the second line, he says he was called out for a fire alarm service, but on arrival he found it was an AOV system. He says, if we go on to paragraph 21, there we go, at the top of this page, that you spoke to him about the weekly testing of the AOV. Now, my first question is, do you recall this visit from Mr. McAuliffe?
Yes.
And what do you recall of it?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure. I think he was just there to test the system. I'm not sure.
So you remember the fact of it, but nothing more?
I think the previous week when someone turned up and he couldn't get hold of me, if I remember rightly, I think I was off that day. So they had to rebook it for the following week.
Now, Mr. McAuliffe said that he tested the system on the 15th of May and he asked you to reset the AOV panel after each activation, but you had refused. Why had you refused?
I don't recall that, no.
So if I could just take you to the statement Mr. McAuliffe made to a colleague at Allied Protection, which was on the 26th of June 2017, so after the fire, and some 6 weeks or so after his visit. It's LAK quadruple 0042. And it's 6 paragraphs from the bottom of the page. You see, I went to the top residential floor. I then commenced the test after asking Paul the caretaker to reset the panel after each activation, which he refused. Now, looking at that, does that jog your memory as to what happened during Mr. McAuliffe's visit?
No, because I don't know why I refused to reset the panel.
Would you?
No, I wouldn't refuse. If he's there to test the system and he wants a hand for me to reset it so he can set it off again, then no, I wouldn't refuse to reset it.
Looking at matters more broadly, did you provide any assistance or advice to him when he attended the tower on the 15th of May 2017?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah, possibly. But I don't refuse. I don't remember refusing to reset the panel.
Do you remember whether Mr. McAuliffe tested the system on all floors or just the ground floor or a sample of floors?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know, because we don't walk about with them. When they do their tests, we don't have enough time to walk about with them. You've got 20 floors, 20 odd floors in Grenfell Tower.
Are you able to assist the panel on any information regarding the operation of the environmental AOV function at the end of Mr. McAuliffe's visit?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Of course. Do you know what the state of the environmental AOV function was when Mr. McAuliffe tested?
As far as I know, it was still working. It was working, yeah.
Now, can we go to LAK, quadruple 0, 00, 11? Now, this is a copy of an inspection and servicing certificate produced by Mr. McAuliffe on the 15th of May 2017. We can see that it lists the checks he carried out. And on the top half of the page, under job details and heading, description of works carried out, he summarised the work as AOV tested all OK. Now, to the best of your knowledge, was this the last time the AOV system was tested, apart from by you, before the fire?
It's possible, yeah.
Now, the third and final incident the third one I'd like to discuss with you is one involving Magnus George on the 25th of May 2017. Now, Magnus George was also from Allied Protection, and he attended the tower on the 25th of May. Now, in a statement made to a colleague at Allied Protection on the 26th of June 2017, he explained that the purpose of the visit was to investigate a coil of cable in the ceiling area near the top floor boiler room. And then he went on to say that the TMO caretaker showed him where this cable was, and he stated that it was a fire alarm cable of around 3 meters length with no device attached, which terminated into the automatic smoke vent extract system box. Do you recall that visit?
Yes.
What do you remember of it?
I remember we went up to the roof where the water tanks were, and there was, I don't know who saw the wire first, but there was a coil of wire just rolled up, just hanging there, wasn't attached to anything. I took him up to the roof and gave him access to the roof, and I'll be honest with you, I can't recall what happened after that. I'm not sure if it was an old cable wire or someone had run a cable wire that didn't need to run a cable wire, so I'm not sure what happened to that.
Did you express any view as to what the purpose of the cable was, or was it Mr. George reached the conclusion that it was to do with the fire alarm cable?
I'll be honest with you, I can't remember what was done.
Can you remember whether any action was taken as a result of identifying this cable?
I don't recall it, no, but there probably was, yeah.
But you don't know what it was?
No.
Can you remember whether Mr. George tested or checked any element of the AOV system when he visited?
I'll be honest with you, I can't recall it. Possible, I don't know.
Now, the final incident involved Mr. David Hughes on the 1st of June 2017. Now, Mr. Hughes was the ride and site manager, and we've heard evidence from him about a defects inspection at the tower on the 1st of June 2017. Mr. Hughes said that during a walk around, he noticed that the environmental function of the smoke extract system was not working. Mr. Hughes says he checked the main control panel, and this did not appear to show any vents open. Now, first of all, were you aware that the environmental function of the system was not working?
No.
Were you part of this walk around, to the best of your knowledge, on the 1st of June 2017?
I don't think I was.
were you usually involved in walkarounds when the ride and site manager attended site? Certainly in
Not
2017.
not usually, not unless they needed us there or we needed to be there.
Had there been any indication before the 1st of June 2017 that the environmental function was not working?
No.
After the visit on the 1st of June 2017, do you remember anyone contacting you about the functionality of the environmental function of the OV system?
Not that I can recall, no.
Thank you. Now, I'm now turning on to a separate topic, which is the inspection of lifts. Now, if we can go to TMO 00870-944, and this is your second statement to this inquiry, and you detail at paragraphs 4 to 6 your process for the weekly and monthly checks that you carried out on the lifts at Grenfell Tower. Now, if I could ask you to turn over the page to paragraph 6, you say this, and I quote, "I wish to clarify that in my earlier statement where I said that I would check the LFB drop key was working, I was not referring to the drop key that would be used by the LFB to take control of the lift. I would not touch the LFB drop key for the lift, and I suspect this was checked by the LFB during regular visit. What I was referring to was the LFB drop key for the main door to the tower." Now, was there a TMO lift's drop key which was kept in the tower?
Not that I can remember, no.
You never had reason to use one?
No, all caretakers have got their own lift drop keys.
You say that you suspect that the lift drop key would be checked by the LFB on their regular visits.
Yeah.
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 Now, did you yourself ever test the lift's fire control switch?
No, we didn't touch that.
Would you know nonetheless how to operate it?
I do now because we done training on it about 2 weeks ago, so yes, I do now.
But you wouldn't
I
before the
didn't at the time, no.
If you just, sorry, wait for the question
Sure.
and then answer. But you didn't know about it before the fire?
No.
Do you recall the LFB carrying out any tests of the fire control switch on the lifts?
No, again, when they used to turn up and do their tests, we was never around with them. We never went around with them while they done their tests. We just left them to get on to do what they had to do.
Do you have any memory of the TMO lifts maintenance contractors, PDERS, or PDERS, testing the fire control switch at any time?
No, because again, we never used to walk around with them or hang around with them when they was doing their tests.
Would you be notified as to when they'd be attending the tower, for example?
Not usually, no. They used to just turn up, and if you saw them, you knew they was there.
Now, can I go back to your first statement to the inquiry, which is at TMO 100-49875/4 and paragraph 20. And in the third line of that paragraph, you say this: "I recall that there was a gentleman called Robin Kahn who would check the lifts were working for the TMO." Are you referring there to Robin Kalan, who was the
Yes.
TMO's...
Sorry, yes.
And just to confirm, he was the TMO's senior lift engineer, is that right?
Yes.
How often would he check the lifts at Grenfell?
I believe Robin used to come down at least once a week, once a month, as far as I know, yeah.
Do you know whether he would carry out tests of the lift's fire control switch?
I think so, yeah.
On what basis do you say that?
Because Robin was quite thorough when he came down and checked the lift, so yeah, he probably would have checked.
After Robin left the TMO in 2012, who would carry out those type of checks?
As far as I know, the lift engineers.
The maintenance contractors
Yeah.
you're referring to there?
Yeah.
Now, can I ask us to turn to a separate document which can be found at TMO 00849-330, and this is entitled The Kensington Chelsea TMO Lift Safety Breakdown and Trap-In Policy and Procedure. Were you familiar with that policy and procedure?
Yes.
Was that a result of training or application or both?
Probably training, but what you got to understand was when they changed the 2 lifts at Grenfell Tower, they realised that it was going to take 4 people to do a lift trapping rather than 3, and there was only ever 3 caretakers at Lancaster West.
And when you say trap-in, just for the avoidance of doubt,
If someone got stuck in the lift, we used to do lift trap. When I first started there, we used to do lift trappings. The old lifts that they had in there used to take 3 of us to get someone out the lift, 1 on the floor to get them out, 2 up in the lift motor room. But when they changed the lifts, Robin found out that the new lifts that they had fitted in were too heavy, and it was going to take 4 caretakers. But on Lankwest, there was only ever 3 caretakers. So that was when they stopped everyone doing lift trappings.
now, if we can stay in this document but go to page 30 and Appendix E, which is entitled Checks, and at paragraph 1, it deals with checks by staff, caretakers, which sets out the checks that estate staff were required to do. I'll just let you briefly familiarise yourself with those 11 items. Were you familiar with those checks
Yes.
as a result of training or application in practice? Or
Probably training, yeah.
would you carry out all of these checks during the course of your health and safety inspections?
Up until when we stopped doing lift trappings, I wouldn't use the lift key. Probably everything, or most of everything else, all lift machinery.
You say most.
Yeah.
What wouldn't you do and why?
Well, I wouldn't be opening it up until when they changed the lifts. I wouldn't be opening the doors with the release key
And why not?
because they stopped us doing lift trappings, and you don't do it on your own because of health and safety.
Okay. What other items wouldn't you do?
I'd probably do virtually everything else on there.
Okay. Now, you referred in an earlier answer to training. First of all, when did you provide training on the checks that were required to be carried out in relation to the lift? When did you receive training, I should say?
Probably when I first started, that would have been back in 2002.
Anything else thereafter?
I think Robin used to do like a refresher course every now and again, probably once or twice a year, up until he stopped us.
And did you receive any further training once the new lifts had been installed?
Yes, that was when he found out that the lifts were too heavy for 3 people.
And in the years immediately before the fire, did you receive any further lift check specific training?
Yeah, I think Robin used to set it up. I'm not sure if it was once a year or twice a year, but we used to go.
Well, Robin left in 2012.
Yeah.
In the 5 years before the fire,
Oh, the 5 years going up, then no.
nothing.
No.
How did you record the outcome of each of these checks on your PDA?
I think with the old system, I think it was just a tick sheet, just yes, no, yes, no. and a little box if you had anything to fill in, just to write in underneath.
Now, looking at paragraph 1 of this Appendix E and looking at the second line, it says reports of damage, etc., are to be reported immediately to the TMO's senior lift engineer. Did you report incidents of damage to the senior lift engineer?
Yes, we used to ring it through.
And after Robin Callan left in 2012, to whom did you report incidents of damage?
I think it was a girl called Maria Ayres that still works for us.
Ez, is that EZ or?
No, I can't remember how you spell her surname, but it's Maria Ayres with an S, I think.
And do you remember damage being rectified swiftly, or were there ever any delays in making good?
Yeah, we used to report it through to Maria, and then she'd get in touch with the lift contractor, and they used to come out probably following day and do what they got to do.
Now, in your first statement to the police, we don't need to go to it, but the reference is MET 000 398 14/1, and it's 4 lines from the bottom of the second paragraph. You state that the lifts were constantly breaking down. What sort of problems before the fire were experienced in relation to the lifts?
They was constantly breaking down. One day you could go in one day and one lift would be broken. That'd be up and running. Probably 3 or 4 days later, and another lift would be broken.
Were you ever told the reason for this constant run of breakdowns?
No.
Was there ever a problem with the fire control switch, insofar as you're aware?
I don't know. I wouldn't know.
Now I'm going to turn to a separate topic, which is fire risk assessments and the LFB deficiency notice. Now, first of all, I'd like to discuss with you the extent of your involvement with Carl Stokes. Now, if we turn to CST 000 3181/3, and this is Carl Stokes FRA for Grenfell, dated the 29th of December 2010. And on page 3, under the heading Person Consulted During the Assessment, it's the third heading down, we see your name, and it states you were consulted, and that's repeated in the FRAs of November 2012 and October 2014. Were you consulted as part of the FRA preparation process?
Not that I recall, no.
You never consulted by Carl Stokes?
No, from time to time when he was around, he used to pop into our office and mention stuff, but all of our FRAs used to get sent through from Janice or Adrian through to our line manager, who then passed it on to us. But
do you remember whether any of your colleagues, I'm thinking of Seamus or Rob, were they ever consulted by Carl Stokes for the purposes of preparing his FRA?
Not that I can recall, no.
Do you recall ever joining Carl Stokes on one of his visits round Grenfell Tower when he was preparing the FRA?
Not that I can recall, no.
If we could go to CST 000 3165/4, and this is the FRA action plan of the 29th of December 2010. And if we go to, as we've got here, page 4 and item 20, it says in the actions to be taken column, can it be confirmed that the caretaker is carrying out the daily checks as per the caretaker's checklist? And if we go over the page, identical confirmation is sought for monthly checks at items 23B and 23E, in the second and bottom rows respectively. Now, we don't need to go to them, but he raised the same or similar actions in his FRA action plans in November 2012, October 2014, April and June 2016. At any stage were you asked by Carl Stokes whether you were carrying out the required checks or not?
Possibly, but at them in them dates, 2009 and 2008.
No, I didn't.
Yeah,
No, I wasn't asking about '08. This is an action plan from December 2010.
yeah,
His subsequent, he asked for the same confirmation that the caretakers are carrying out daily checks as per the caretaker's checklist. And he says he seeks the same confirmation both in 2010, 2012, 2014, and April and June 2016. Now, did he ever ask you directly whether you're carrying out the caretaker's checks?
possibly, yeah, yeah.
Well, earlier on you said you weren't consulted by him for the purposes of completing the FRA. So bearing in mind that answer, could I ask you again whether Carl Stokes asked you directly whether you carried out the required daily, weekly and monthly checks?
Possibly, yeah.
You say possibly, is that inclining to likely?
Yes.
Were you provided with this or any other action plan arising out of an FRA?
Yes.
And were you given the complete document or just extracts that concerned you?
Just extracts that concerned me.
And who provided you with the extracts from the action plan?
My line manager.
And would the line manager ask you for confirmation that you're carrying out the checks as required on a daily, weekly and monthly basis?
Yes.
Can you remember any further action being taken once you provided that confirmation?
No, as far as I know, it all just got fed into the system and put down as done.
Now, moving on from this, looking at the general process, you say that and you've just confirmed that you'd receive FRAs, or certainly the action plans. Would you receive the FRAs themselves after they'd been completed?
No.
How would you be told what actions Carl Stokes required to be done following an FRA?
I wouldn't. We used to just get the FRAs through and told that it had to be done. We used to do it, provide proof that it had been done, and then that was it. We'd just wait for the next lot.
What sort of FRA actions would you be asked to carry out?
Oh God, it could be anything. If there was a door not closing properly, if there was a build-up of rubbish outside someone's main entrance flat door, or
Well, just following on from that, could I ask you to turn to TMO 100-15993, which is an email from Janice Ray to you on the 18th of January 2017, and it's about an FRA action regarding a damaged front entrance door for flat 24 at Grenfell. The letterbox was missing. And we see there Janice Ray's email was sent at 2:17. If we scroll up to 2:56, we see an email from you saying, all done. Had you carried out an inspection of that flat entrance door to allow you to answer all done slightly more than half an hour later?
yeah,
You went straight out and inspected the...
straight out to flat 24. Yeah.
Now, the action plan on which prompted Janice Ray's email was dated the 20th of June 2016, and the action isn't recorded as completed until some 6 months later. Are you able to explain the delay between service of the action plan and completion of the action required?
No.
Now, can I turn to the LFB deficiency notice of the 17th of November 2016 served in relation to Grenfell? I want to ask you about your involvement in rectifying issues identified by the LFB's audit of the tower in October 2016. Now, if we could go to a version of the notice deficiencies, which is a TMO 00873834. Now, the manuscript annotation was made by Janice Ray in February 2017. If I can ask us to go to, I think it's page 3, and then go on to page 4, sorry. Sorry, it's my fault. Go back to page 2. And back to page 1. Do you remember that letter being shown to you by Janice Ray at any stage?
No.
Do you recall ever being contacted by Janice Ray to address any matters identified by the LFB in the notice of deficiencies?
Not that I recall, no.
Would she routinely ask you about matters that had been identified in notices of deficiencies served by the LFB?
She usually would if it was something that I would have been checking, but other than that, no.
Now, if we can go to page 6. And we see Article 15. And we see in the middle column, 4th line down, it says, "It was found that fire action notices were not displayed in your common parts." Actually, if we can get, sorry, I've taken you to the wrong document. If we can go to TMO 00861389. If we go now to page 6. Now, following on from that, Janice Ray emailed you on the 15th of December 2016, which is the top email, saying Seamus Dunley has put these fire action notices up on each lobby at Grenfell Tower now. Can you include these on your regular inspections and advise if any are removed or defaced? Now, bearing in mind the LFB's notice of deficiencies, from 15th of December 2016 onwards, did you include fire action notices as part of your regular inspections?
Possibly, yeah.
Now, you say possibly. They don't appear in the ESA checklists. So how did you ensure that you had inspected that fire action notices were up on each lobby?
I would have done a visual check, and if there was any missing, then I would have contacted Janice Ray. Or Seamus, because Seamus probably would have had spare ones that he could have put up.
Was there a facility on the PDA to allow you to record whether...
No.
Just to complete the question, was there a facility on the PDA which allowed you to record whether a fire action notice was missing?
No.
Before the fire and after December 2016, do you recall whether any notices had been removed or defaced at Grenfell?
I hadn't noticed, no.
Now can I turn to a separate matter, which is the emergency plan and vulnerable residents, and really your responsibilities and role in the event of an emergency, and particularly in relation to vulnerable residents. Now, if we can go to TMO 100282449/46. And we see here in the first paragraph of the emergency planning section of the Estate Staff Quick Reference Handbook of June 2013, it says this: KCTMO has a documented emergency plan which will be invoked when the situation requires it. ESAs are an important link in the emergency planning process due to their local knowledge. You may be called out at any time during and for resident ESAs outside of working hours to deal with an emergency situation. And then it goes on to set out various responsibilities for ESAs discharge in the event of emergency. Were you aware of your role and responsibilities in the event of an emergency?
Yes.
What did you understand your responsibilities and role to be?
If they needed if there was an emergency after hours, and then we was there to assist.
Anything more definitive than there to assist? Or detailed?
Well, no, because it depends where the emergency was and how many caretakers were there.
And had you received any training in relation to your role and responsibilities as part of the emergency plan?
No,
Never.
never.
Now, could we go to Carl Stokes's FRA of the 20th of June 2016 for Grenfell, and it's CST *0 3145/5. And if we can look at the last box on that page, and third line from the bottom, he says this: the fire service or TMO employees will arrange for a general evacuation of the whole building at any time if this is appropriate to do so. Now that sentence is recorded in every FRA he wrote for the tower between 2010 and 2016. The first question is this: were you ever told that you might need to arrange or play a part in the arrangement of an evacuation of Grenfell Tower in the event of a fire?
No.
Were you ever told that the lifts at Grenfell Tower were firefighter evacuation lifts?
No.
Were you ever told that you might be required to use the lifts in the event of an emergency at the tower?
No.
Did you receive any training on operation of the lifts and how they were to be used in the event of an emergency?
No.
Now, if we can return to the Estate Staff Quick Reference Handbook, which can be found at TMO 100284449/47. And the third paragraph down says that ESAs are are required to advise of any known vulnerable, less able-bodied residents that may come to your attention as needing assistance. Pass this information on to the CSC. Now, CSC is Customer Service Centre, I think.
Yeah.
Now, were you aware of that requirement?
Possibly, yeah. Yeah.
Did you understand that you were required to pass on your knowledge of any vulnerable or disabled resident only when an emergency had arisen, or generally whenever you identified such a resident during the course of your inspections?
Yes, and we did. We passed it on to the office.
No, my question is more specific. Did you understand that you were required to pass on your knowledge of a vulnerable disabled resident in an emergency, or when you came across a disabled or vulnerable person during the course of your inspections?
Yes.
Which one?
Both. We passed it on. If there was an emergency and we knew if it was after office hours and we knew and there was an emergency and we knew there was someone that was disabled or vulnerable, and then yes, we would pass it on to whoever was there, the fire brigade, the ambulance.
And during the
What
course,
about if you came across someone who was obviously had mobility difficulties when you were doing your inspection of the tower? Would you tell the office about that?
The office probably, if they lived on our estate, then the office probably would have known before me.
Well, they might have done.
Yeah.
In case they didn't, would you tell the office?
I'd still pass it on to the office, yeah.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
now, did you receive any training on the identifying and reporting vulnerable disabled residents, say, for example, during the course of your inspections?
No.
Did you ever have cause to report the location or problems with a vulnerable disabled resident, for example, to a housing officer or to the office?
The only one time I do remember reporting it, and me and Seamus reported it, was when Grenfell Tower was handed back to us. We had a resident that moved into one of the flats that was in a wheelchair. Her wheelchair was too big to get through the doorway, so she had to plug it in outside the doorway, and we reported that back to the housing officers. We reported it back to health and safety, and
that was the one time
that was the only one I can think of. Yeah.
Finally, can I ask you to go to a TMO document entitled Supporting Residents Procedure, dated April 2016, which can be found at TMO 00866013. Have you seen that before?
No.
Now, if notwithstanding that answer, if we look at paragraph 1.1, sets out the key aim of the procedure to ensure that residents get access to any additional support they need to live their lives. 1.2, prime intention is to ensure that we have the information we need to be able to support our residents. If we look at 2.1, all members of staff have a duty to consider whether a resident may have support needs. You see estate service officers are identified at the third bullet point. And then if we go on to paragraph 2.2, they set out various indicators that a resident might require support. Even if you hadn't seen this document before, were you aware, first of all, of the expectation on you as an employee of the TMO to consider whether a resident may have support needs?
Yeah.
And looking at paragraph 2.2 and the indicators, were those indicators which, as a matter of practice, you were aware of? And we can go on to page 2 to see any further ones.
Yeah.
Did you receive any training on how to identify vulnerable residents?
No.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Steadman, that concludes the questions I was intending to ask you. Sir, might I have 10 minutes to see whether there's anything I've missed off or whether any further questions arise?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Steadman, when counsel gets to the end of the questions he thinks he needs to ask you, we always have a break because he needs time to check that he hasn't overlooked anything. And there may be questions from other people who aren't in the room which they'd like us to put to you. So we are going to break now until 25 to 1, I'm sorry. And then when you come back, we'll see if there are any more questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
All right? And while you're out of the room, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence.
Yeah.
And then if you go with the usher, she'll look after you. Thank you. Right, I'm going to say 25 to 1. If you need more time, you can let us know in the usual way.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Yes, would you ask Mr. Steadman to come back in, please? Right, Mr. Steadman.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if there are any more questions for you. Yes, Mr. Kinnear.
Thanks. So just a very few, Mr. Steadman, I can assure you. Were you ever required to post fire safety leaflets to residents' homes at Grenfell?
I think I was, but I'm not sure how long ago that was. I think I do recall doing it.
How frequently?
It was not frequently. Probably all the time I've been here is probably only once or twice that I've done it.
Can you remember whether the leaflets were produced by the TMO or were they LFB produced leaflets? Can you
I can't recall.
Could I ask you briefly to look at CST 000 17272? Does that look familiar as one of the letters you may have posted through letterboxes?
No, it doesn't look familiar.
Mr. Steadman, thank you. The final thing for me to say, I have no further questions, but I must say thank you very much for attending to the inquiry today. It's very much appreciated.
And Mr. Steadman, it's right that I should thank you on behalf of all three members of the panel for your coming to give your evidence. It's been helpful to hear what you have to say, and we're very grateful to you for coming along and giving us your time. Thank you very much, and now you're free to go.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Well, now, Mr. Kinnear, where do we go next?
The next witness is Mr. Robert Regan.
Yes.
I would ask that we start his evidence at 2 o'clock.
Yes.
I am completely confident that his evidence will be completed this afternoon. The basis of that confidence is that neither myself nor Mr. Millett is examining him, and Miss Jones is. And so on that, I think, cast iron assurance, I would invite you to sit at 2.
Right, well, thank you. Well, there'll have to be a break anyway at this stage so that we can prepare the room for the next witness and the next counsel. And it sounds to me as though you have every reason to be confident about the afternoon's progress.
Thanks.
So on that basis, we'll break now and resume with the next witness at 2 o'clock then.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.